The reason we play that to start, I hope everybody can hear me. The reason we play that to start is because very, very few people know what squash is. So being the winningest coach in sport history is a little bit like being the tallest midget at the circus. You know, people don't really know what it is that I do. So that's why we kick it off with that. But my name is Paul Assaiante, and I am a coach, and I have the best job in the world. I get to work with young people every day of my life, and I consider myself blessed. The next thing I want to talk about is fear. The title of my book is called Run to the Roar. Now that's a New York accent, so you might not make out the last word. Roar, like a lion's roar. And where that title came from was that in the jungle, lions hunt in packs. This is a true story. And what they do is they take with them the oldest female of the pride. By this point, she's toothless, infirmed, can't see well, a lot like me. But she has the loudest roar in the pride. And what they do is they position this lioness in the middle of the field facing the bush. And all the lionesses hide in the bush. And so when the old lady roars, what does the prey do? They run away from the roar to their death. So the title of the book, Run to the Roar, is to encourage people to go at their problems. And this is something we need to do in life and in the workplace all the time. We need to go at what we perceive to be the problem. It was sort of a funny experience when we first came up with the book, which is about to be made into a movie, which is absolutely mind-blowing. But when we came up with the title, Penguin Books called me and they said, "Coach, you got a problem?" I said, "Okay, what's that?" And they said, "Well, your title has been used before." I said, "Oh my gosh, what does that mean?" They said, "It doesn't mean anything. You can't copyright a title." And I said, "Well, that's interesting, but just out of interest's sake, who used my title before me?" It was Tammy Faye Baker. So usually when I speak, I wear a lot of eye makeup and rouge, and it goes very well. But the issue of managing fear, on the first day of practice, almost all of my contemporaries sit down with their teams and they goal set. What are we going to do as a team this year? You know, individually and as a team, what's our goals? I don't do that. What I do with the boys on the first day of practice is I ask them, what are you afraid of? What are your fears? Because until you come to grips with your fears, you cannot fly. You cannot go out to try to achieve your goals, because that hump on your back is always going to hold you back. It's a very good thing for us to talk to our children about. The boys will come into my office every day, and after 40 years of coaching, you can imagine some of the things I've heard in my office. And I always ask them, what's the worst that can happen? And they're dealing with, you know, monumental issues like, I got my car towed again and I don't want to call my father, or, you know, I don't want to tell my girlfriend that she's about to be my ex-girlfriend. So, you know, what is it that's holding you back? But when we get into it and we start talking about what it is that they're frightened of, all of a sudden the clouds part. And you can see they become empowered in believing that they can actually strive to go forward. One of the things that I always address with the boys, and I have fought with Jim Calhoun at UConn for years about this, is we need to instill in our young people confidence. And the way that we do that is we teach them that it's okay to make mistakes. That's one of the fears. Fear prevents you from trying, from taking intelligent risks. And so what I do is I really try to encourage my guys to take intelligent, well-measured, calculated risks. Because it's through those risks that you learn. And if you're afraid to try, then you will never make any mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, then you're not learning and you're not advancing. And the culture has changed. When young people come to me now, they're more put together than I've ever seen before. They look perfect. But as soon as they face their first moment of adversity, they fall apart like a porcelain doll. Because they don't have the tools. They're not equipped to deal with the challenges of life because they've been raised to be perfect. They've been raised to believe that you cannot make mistakes. You cannot fail. I see more cheating in college today than I've ever seen before. Why? Because they can't fail. They're texting each other answers in exams. And I'll sit the boys down and I'll say, you would never consider cheating on the squash court. Why are you cheating in that classroom? Wouldn't it be a more accurate measure, an honest measure of your knowledge of the information if you failed the exam than to go ahead and cheat and dodge that bullet for yet another day? But they're not wired that way anymore. So it all comes down to the management of fear. Who were the greatest fighters in history? The samurai. And why were they the greatest fighters in history? Because they had already come to grips with the biggest fear on the battlefield. They weren't afraid to die. They actually thought it was a noble cause. I make all of my players watch the movie The Last Samurai. How many of you have ever seen that? It's with Tom Cruise. I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. He's a little poofy. But at any rate, I make them watch the movie. And it's an amazing movie because early on, he gets kidnapped by the samurai, and he's learning the ways of the samurai. And there's one scene where he gets in a fight with this little old Yoda, and Yoda beats the hell out of him. And Tom Cruise says, "What was that all about?" And he says, "Well, too many voices. Too many voices." That's what happens in our heads. Too much fear. When you're really engaged and you're in the zone, it's quiet, it's silent. When you're hitting on all pistons, you're in the zone, there is no fear. At the end of the movie, Tom Cruise and his soldiers are riding into battle against the Japanese, who are mowing them down with Gatling guns. And the Japanese are crying because they are so humbled by the courageousness of the samurai that they would know that they were riding into their death. And in one scene, his contemporary falls to the ground having been mortally wounded. And Tom gets off his horse, and the samurai says, "Do it." And Tom has to kill him. And when he sticks his sword in him, the man looks up at him and he says, "Perfect." So they were the ferocious fighters because they had no fear. So the question here is, how do you deal with your fear? Speaking to your supervisors, speaking to the people around you, so that